Tonight we have the distinct privilege of speaking with Hazel Malcolmson, principal bassoon of the Orchestra of Indian Hill. Hazy has been with us for a few years, but she remains extensively active elsewhere. Not only has she performed with the Boston Symphony, the Boston Pops, a Far Cry Ensemble, Boston Lyric Opera, and other orchestras in Portland, Providence, and Springfield, but she's also been hired by orchestras in Florida, South Carolina, and even Mexico City, where she is currently, and where she was acting principal for an entire season. She's a graduate of both New England Conservatory and the Juilliard School. Welcome, Hazy. Great to have you with us.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's a pleasure indeed. How's the weather in Mexico City?
It is really quite lovely.
Uh,
It is,
oh, good. That's what I
it's,
hear, actually.
it's almost always pleasant here.
Yeah, that's what I understand. And the people are nice and the tacos are great.
Oof, definitely.
So I always like to start these interviews by asking how you got started. Were your parents musical? Were you given a choice as to what instrument you wanted to play? And when and where did all this happen?
Yeah. Neither of my parents were musical at all. My mom happened to be gifted a little bit of money from an aunt of hers, and she bought me a Fisher Price toy organ.
Hmm.
And I was, I don't know, 3 or 4 years old. And instead of asking for breakfast every morning, I started playing on the toy organ. And so that led to piano lessons um, and then later the public school that I went to, Carlisle Public School, um, everybody had to play an instrument in the fourth grade. So I started playing clarinet. I did that for a couple of years, and then I needed some change, and my mom suggested the bassoon. And I said, "The what?" and, and she, although she had me listen to recordings and um, things like Britten's guide to the orchestral instruments,
Mhm.
um, to point out the bassoon, it just didn't, until I could see it and touch it and play it, it didn't really register. And then my bassoon teacher got me involved in what's now called BISO, Boston Youth Symphony Orchestras, out of BU, and then I took off. My love for music just, yeah, took off from there. So
Fantastic. So then you got your bachelor's degree at Juilliard. How did you get there? Just by auditioning, I guess, or was there a different story
yeah,
behind it?
um, well, there was always a little bit of a conversation about whether I should be a full-time professional musician or something else. And so I actually had started out in the Columbia Juilliard dual program, um, and and which is turns out is quite a lot of work.
Hmm.
And I just wanted to be at Juilliard. So eventually, after a couple of years of trying to keep up with both schools, I switched to Juilliard and finished up there. Yeah.
I see. So then it was a pretty obvious choice to come back to New England Conservatory for your graduate degree.
Yeah, well, no.
Oh, okay. Sounds
um,
like a story. Can't wait.
After Juilliard, I freelanced for a little bit, and then it's not so easy getting started freelancing, and I really had no idea how to do it. Um, and and the one orchestra that I was playing with regularly was going to stop, was going to close down, and so I said, "Oh my gosh, what do I do?" And and I remember, when I was little, my mom said, "Well, you should be a doctor, lawyer, banker." And
Hmm.
so I said, "Well, of those three, lawyer seemed to be the one thing that, I don't know, seemed to be the most interesting and easiest route to get to."
Hmm.
So I worked as a paralegal for a couple of years while putting together an application for law school, and I went to law school and then worked as a lawyer for about 6 years, almost 6 years, before saying, I still want to play the bassoon.
Hmm.
And in my last year of working as a lawyer, I started playing again and putting it all back together. And then I took a year to really finesse everything and did grad school auditions. And I had a great opportunity to come up here to NEC.
That's fantastic. So I was curious, when you were working towards being a lawyer
Yeah,
in that interim time,
yeah.
did you still pick up the bassoon from time to time just for pleasure?
No, I sold my instrument, which was
Oh,
probably a
what? No.
terrible, terrible decision. Um, so I had nothing at my disposal. And
Hmm.
maybe my plastic clarinet was still in the attic, my mom's attic, but nothing, that was really interesting to me. So I was without. I didn't even really listen to much classical music in those years.
Really?
I
Well,
think it
well.
just it too was too close, you know, to my heart.
But now the classical music is definitely full-time
Yes,
occupation for you.
yeah, yeah,
Yes? Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
And you're finding decent work in Mexico as well?
Things are with the pandemic, things are very slow right now.
Hmm.
But I do have a number of contacts here, and so I'm hopeful that I can start to work here as well as things pick up again in Boston, start to
Hmm.
um,
Hmm.
keep those connections. I just got married
Hey,
a couple of months
congratulations.
a couple of
Oh,
months ago.
fantastic.
So we're doing the green card process right now,
Okay. Okay.
and so I'm sort of in a holding pattern at the moment while we wait for
Mhm.
that, and then we can go back to the US. Yeah.
So that's a great segue into a question that I usually ask towards the end of these interviews, and that is, how was the pandemic for you, and how did you survive, and how did you maintain any sense of creativity and musicianship and all the rest
Yeah.
these last 14 months or so?
Yeah. It well, in some ways, this past year or so has been absolutely incredible. Um, Musically, it was a little bit up and down. Um, for the first time in a very long time, I had been working so hard for so many years. I could rest. I got to rest during this pandemic, which was so welcome. And I also got to focus on my personal life, which was also something um, I had just been, so focused on
Mhm.
being a lawyer and then coming back to bassoon and all this stuff that I hadn't. Um, it was really nice to be able to take care of the other parts of my life.
Right.
Um,
Fantastic. Yeah.
yeah, and so I was able to play a little bit some concerts last fall
Mhm.
with an orchestra in Toluca, which is about an hour west of Mexico City. Um, and but definitely my practicing has been a little bit up and down as opportunities have appeared and not appeared and stuff
Right,
like that.
right.
So,
That's why whenever I send an email out to all the orchestra members, I say at the bottom, be sure practice now. Same
yeah,
thing is true with me. Score study, it requires a certain amount of discipline
right,
to get those scores out. I don't have an instrument, I don't have a I don't have an orchestra to work with, but
right,
I can pull the music out and stare at it and hear it in my head. But you're right. I mean, it's a different kind of discipline than when you have the deadlines always of another rehearsal or another
right,
concert program to look
right.
forward to. Absolutely.
Yeah,
So tell us a little bit about the bassoon. I think that's an instrument that not too many people are all that aware of.
yeah,
It's been around since the late 1600s, I believe, and so one would be surprised at hearing that it's been that long just because it's not that familiar an instrument. You're
yeah.
sitting in the middle of the orchestra where we barely get to see you. So tell us a little bit about it. What's it made of? How long is it? How hard is it to play? That kind of stuff.
Yeah. Um, Usually they're made of maple, some type of maple wood. I think this one is made of mountain maple. I'm not really sure the significance of that, but um, they are about 8 feet long from the tip all the way up to the top. And down at the bottom here, the tube comes down this side and goes back up that side.
Right. So
Um,
I'm not sure that everybody can see that. It's and
yeah,
in fact it's double barreled. It goes she blows into one barrel, it goes down and then comes zips back up outside the other.
on the other side, yeah.
Right.
And um, people say it's rather difficult. I suppose it is. I've never studied another instrument to this level, so so this is my only
Yeah. Yeah.
knowledge. But it is a double reeded instrument, like the oboe, where I don't know if you can see this here. There's actually two reeds. It's
Yeah.
the opening's rather small, but it's
So
basically
reed, where do you get this reed stuff?
you can
Can I
buy
find some at Walmart if I
no, you buy cane from their specific dealers that sell cane, and you can buy it in anywhere from a tube of cane, bamboo. It's bamboo, a tube of bamboo, and do all the work from splitting and cleaning out the middle part and profiling to clean away some of the bark and shaping. Or you can also buy cane that has been processed to some extent.
Mhm.
Um, and so you end up buying a piece of cane that's kind of rectangular, or you end up with a piece of cane that's rather rectangular, and it gets folded over to make a double reed, and you cut off the tip. So you open up that tip where it's the cane has been folded, and then and you wrap it with some wire and thread and
and this is something you do by yourself.
yes, yeah, yeah.
And if I were to have a student who wanted to start up playing bassoon, do I say, okay, you gotta have to learn how to make your reeds before you can do that, or is it possible for a beginning student to find pre-made reeds somewhere?
Yeah, usually with beginning students, they buy reeds from their teacher.
Hmm.
I did that. Um, I started playing the bassoon when I was about 10 years old, and I bought reeds all the way until college. So I really didn't start making my own reeds until I started in my undergrad year, my undergrad years. And I think my first year of college, I even was still continuing to play on some of those old purchased reeds because my first attempts were were not so great.
Right. So, what's it take to make a great reed? People should know that bassoonists do this as well as oboists. Much of the time that they spent at their in their home studios is spent carving away at this cane to create a reed which responds the way they want it to respond. And what are the kind of factors that you consider when you're experimenting with a read? What makes a good read?
Yeah. I definitely listen to sound. Sound
Hmm.
tells me a lot about how the particular piece of cane vibrates. Um, um, and ultimately, um, there's not a lot you can do about each piece of cane is very, very different, and there's not a lot you can do about that. But the sound will tell me whether it's going to be very resistant, whether I'm going to have to use a lot of air pressure and really struggle to get this thing to vibrate, or whether it's going to be very easy to get it to vibrate, but hard to control, a little bit wild, basically. Those are kind of the two extremes. Um, and you sort of aim for something in the middle um, that has some stability in the sound, in the intonation, but also is responsive. um, so that I can play softly and I can create shapes and um, yeah.
Okay. So, do you actually find yourself changing reeds in the middle of a piece or a concert for different reasons?
Occasionally, I'm more comfortable staying on the same reed. Some people are very comfortable switching reeds. For me, I'd rather stay on the same reed
Okay.
unless one particular piece really demands something special, and that reed is not going to function for the rest of the program. Um,
Okay. Okay.
yeah.
And how many reeds do you have? Do you have just one or two in the in your back pocket kind of thing, or do you have a whole
I think
valise filled with them?
I think I have a box right now filled with, I don't know, 100, 200, I don't know.
Well, well, yeah.
The pandemic gave me lots of, I think it gave us all lots of time to make lots of reads,
Right.
to stock
Yeah.
up.
Better you than me, that's for sure. I'm just having a hard enough time studying my scores. Talk to us as a bassoonist in an orchestra. What do you see as your role playing there in the middle of the orchestra? I mean, obviously you're a bass voice for the woodwind section, which connects to the basses and the strings, and connects also to the tuba and the brass as the lowest voice. But uh, what kind of presence of mind do you bring to your playing in an ensemble to hear what else is going on, and how you what's your role in manipulating and facilitating your music?
Yeah. Um, I definitely feel that the bassoon is sort of the foundation of the woodwind section. So I try to make sure that my pitch, especially, is um, is good. That I'm not getting too sharp or too flat, but also that that I can. If my colleagues have a reliable foundation, they, I hope, feel more free to play their solos above me, if
Makes
I'm
sense.
providing that kind of carpet underneath them.
Right.
Um, and then out from the woodwind section, I find myself listening a lot to the cellos, violas, all of the lower strings, viola, cello, bass, and the horns. Bassoon seems to play a lot with the horns. Um, uh, Also the low brass, but when the low brass are playing, you can't hear the bassoon. So frequently.
Sometimes you can't hear the strings at all when the low brass plays.
Yeah. Um, so yeah, my ears tend to go towards the cellos and the violas and the basses and towards the horns
Right, right,
generally. Yeah.
right, right. And so the woodwind section are the flutes, the oboes, the clarinets, and the bassoons. And generally speaking, every orchestra seats the same, where you have the flutes and the oboes in one row in front, and then the row behind them is the clarinets and bassoons.
Yeah.
Who is the leader of the woodwind section, generally speaking?
Um, I guess when we're all playing, probably the flute. Um, Maybe it depends a little bit on who has the solo line, but usually, if we're all playing, I would be watching the flute player. Um,
Okay, so it is a watching thing. Can you hear a flutist playing in front of you very well?
I can, but I find that if I need to be playing with them, I have an easier time watching uh, the physical movements. I can hear them, but not always as clearly as I want to hear them.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah.
And you've probably seen photos of our new concert hall
Yes.
that I've been sending out every once in a while. What are your thoughts about it, and does specific repertoire come to mind for you?
I think it's so exciting.
Yes.
I just think the possibilities are endless. Summer seasons, expanding the orchestra season, maybe even creating a more robust chamber music program now that
Hmm.
there's one or two recital halls.
Hmm.
Um, and so yeah, and even beefing up the education part of it, and it just, there's so many things that can be done.
Uh, right, exactly. I couldn't have said it better myself. But this is now your chance in front of all these witnesses to make your repertoire suggestions
Ah,
for what kinds of things that we've not been able to do at Littleton High School do you think would you really love to play in the new place?
um, let's see. I'm not really sure. I mean, I guess the thing that comes to mind is that I feel like in as we are able to return to the stage after this pandemic, it just feels like to play something celebratory. I just keep on thinking of Respighi. Um,
Hmm.
there's so much of his music is bright and like birds, and it's just wonderful, festive music. But of course, I mean the I guess the Littleton High School stage probably prevents us from doing things like those Strauss, tone poems and things like that, which can just be so fascinating to pick apart all of the complex, all those lines that are just, twirling around each other.
Well said. Mahler, perhaps,
Yeah, Mahler
the
also. Yeah,
ability to bring in a chorus, a
right.
full chorus, and
Yeah,
have choral repertoire as well as all kinds of things.
yeah,
Um, uh, so, um, uh, Speaking of repertoire, let's talk a little bit about bassoon repertoire. By the way, I have a favorite composer friend who has actually written a piece for a Christmas concert
yeah.
called But Soon It Will Be Christmas.
Yay!
So if we get to do a Christmas concert sometime soon, sometime bassoon,
Yes.
I'll try to program it. I think it's actually for the whole section, all three bassoonists
Okay.
and orchestra.
Yeah.
Um, and bassoon has sometimes been jokingly referred to as the buffoon. Uh,
Right.
why do you think that is? I mean, what is there a certain element about bassoon sound or playing that lends itself to comedic thoughts?
I mean, it's definitely it's very easy to have a very bouncy staccato on the bassoon, much easier than I think maybe almost any other instrument. And so the bassoon is given a lot of lines that are kind of like bum, 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 that kind of thing. And so I think that's where it comes from. It can be very comical,
Yeah,
basically.
that's like the Chinese variation in Nutcracker,
Yeah,
which starts exactly like that. Dum, bum,
yeah,
bum, 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 da-dee-da, da, 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 da-dee-dum, ba. We all know that tune.
yeah,
Or The Sorcerer's Apprentice is another
yes,
bum 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 bum
right.
is another great one. Now, I read somewhere that Vivaldi, this great composer from the Baroque era, apparently composed over 30 concertos for the bassoon. Is that really true? And do they ever sound any different from each other?
I don't remember how many there are, but there are quite a lot, and I want to say 36, but I'm not sure.
Hmm.
Um, um, do they sound any different? I think they can. I have there are maybe five or six that are more popular, and those are definitely have distinct sounds. I can't say that I'm as familiar with the rest of them.
So, what other composers of note have composed bassoon concertos? I'm
Yeah.
curious. Since that time,
Well, I mean, the concerto that is most often played, especially for auditions, is was written by Mozart. We have a concerto from Mozart. Um, And we have a Weber also, Carl
Mm-hmm.
Maria von Weber.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful, beautiful bassoon concerto.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I think a lot of the music, at least that comes to mind most immediately for the bassoon, was written sort of in the past 100 years, or sort of since 1900, about uh,
Mm-hmm.
maybe the late 1800s. Um, more of the modern composers have been, I don't know if they've taken more of an interest in bassoon, or the concertos from before haven't survived
Yeah.
um, as
Yeah.
well.
Possibly so. Even prolific composers like Hummel, I think, or
Yes.
Louis Spohr, I think they might have also actually written bassoon concertos because they
Yeah.
wrote concertos for just about every instrument under the sun
Yeah.
back in those days. So, as a bassoonist, do you have an easier time finding work as a freelancer than, say, a violinist? What do you think?
Oh, I have no idea.
And the related question is, does the world need more bassoon players and students?
Well, I personally think that bassoons are just so much fun that there's no harm in having more
Right,
bassoon players.
right,
Um,
right.
I don't know if bassoonists get more work than violinists, for example, because I think that also there might be more work for violinists. There are, I don't know, 15 or 20 in an orchestra violinists, and there's only two
Mm-hmm,
bassoonists
mm-hmm,
often. Um,
mm-hmm.
there's lots of work that is for strings only, and so nothing, no bassoons at all.
I sometimes wonder if it's maybe because the instrument is not a common one to begin on, and probably
Oh,
almost like you requires somebody to have started on a different instrument, whether it's a woodwind instrument or not, and then
right.
finally graduating to the bassoon. It's not the kind of
Yeah.
thing you find in a band room very often when the elementary kids march down to the band room to pick up something to play. That's for sure.
No, I think you might be right about that because I think most bassoonists that I know started on another instrument,
Yeah.
frequently clarinet. But I think in part because um, it's a pretty big instrument, and so your hands have to be somebody who's younger, um, maybe sort of 9 years old or younger. Their hands just aren't big enough to reach the keys,
Mm-hmm.
basically.
Hmm. Yeah. So, what's the lowest note you can play on that instrument?
That's a B flat, low B
Right.
flat, which is low B flat below the bass clef staff.
Maybe that's why they call it a buffoon.
Oh no.
Just kidding, just kidding, just kidding. So, in contrast, what's the first note in the Rite of Spring that we hear from Stravinsky?
Oh wow. It's a high C, which is it's the C that's one octave above middle C. Um,
And is that difficult to produce?
um, Not with a lot of practice. I mean, it's always scary, yes. Um, but but practice definitely helps.
Yeah, and I would imagine that note, and I'm sorry to spring that on you, by the way. We hadn't rehearsed that part. So I imagine it's actually quite difficult because you're all by yourself in that particular episode of The Rite of Spring. The Rite of Spring starts with that one note in the bassoon. Nobody else is playing.
Right,
And so I can imagine that the pressure is probably quite significant to
right.
start that piece.
Yeah.
Um, But the natural sort of playing low, can you just kind of demonstrate something without playing one of your prepared pieces? Just what's the sound of the best sound of the bassoon overall?
Um, Usually it's in the range that we call the tenor register. I guess
Hmm.
we call it the tenor register because that's where a tenor singer would sing.
Hmm.
Um, um,
Yeah, fantastic. It's amazing you play that. Actually, we hadn't rehearsed that either. I've been the last couple of weeks studying Scheherazade. It's on our list of programs for this coming year, as it was last year
right.
when we had to cancel it, unfortunately. And actually, just this afternoon, I was looking at that bassoon solo, just wanting to, because it says quasi recitative,
Yeah.
and when we get to that point next year with you playing it, I'm going to encourage you to be more recitative than not, more free with it as much as you'd like. But that's really amazing as a sound. So you've agreed to play for us a couple of short pieces by a famous Brazilian composer, Francisco Mignone. And he was apparently very famous both as composer and conductor of a lot of great stuff. But this is the only piece he wrote for solo bassoon, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. And this is a piece, it's a collection of waltzes, 16 waltzes for solo bassoon, is what he called it. And tell us a little bit about, you said you're going to play two for us. Tell us a little bit about this first one.
Yeah. Um, the rain has just started here, so it's
Uh-huh.
it's gonna be a little
I wonder if
noisy.
that's the same storm because I just had the rain here just a few minutes ago.
Um, um, so there was a very famous bassoon player down in Brazil, um, name whose name was Noel Devos. I'm not exactly sure how you pronounce that. He was from France originally, and I believe that he played the French bassoon. There are two different types of bassoons. Most people play the German bassoon, which is what I play, but there's also the French bassoon, which has a slightly different sound. Um, and but anyway, so he played the French bassoon, and Mignone, I think, was very inspired by him, and I believe, I'm not sure to what extent, but I believe they worked together in writing these waltzes, or uh, Devos, I think, probably. Well, I don't know really the extent, um, but he recorded them, and to me, it's one of the um, musically speaking, they're just incredible. His recording, he really seemed to understand the concept of what Mignone was trying to express. Um,
Hmm.
and so the first one is based on uh, the there's a famous type of song in Brazil called the choro, and so it's called valsa choro, and which I guess is sort of a very expressive song type of song, and um, yeah.
Yeah, well, actually, choro in Portuguese means I cry or I weep.
Okay. Okay.
And it's based on actually a traveling band, a serenading band of musicians would play,
Okay.
starting in the early 20th century, and it was something like charones are the people who sing the choros.
Okay.
And as you and I talked the other day, Villalobos has composed a whole series of choros pieces, and so this will be nice to hear a waltz for solo bassoon in the
Yeah,
style of choros.
yeah.
So why don't you go ahead and play it, and then we'll talk a little more right after. Very nice. Bravo. Bravo. Wow, that piece really incorporates the whole range of the bassoon, doesn't it? It's amazing. You even played higher than that high C from the Stravinsky that I asked you to play up to an E flat as well. And almost goes down to the B flat, the way the lowest note of the instrument. Are there any particular challenges with that kind of repertoire in terms of technique overall?
Definitely the range. For these waltzes, they almost all of them have and use the full range of the instrument, which means that um, you need to have a reed that can do everything. And often reeds are much better at one end or the other end of the instrument, the high
Hmm.
end or the low end.
Hmm.
And so it's not easy to get something that can play up high beautifully and also will allow you to have control in the low register, or vice versa. Yeah.
Makes sense. So in addition to the requirements for your comfortable reed, does it require extra lung power, or what we call in the chops, your embouchure, in terms of covering a wide range like that?
Um, I don't notice that as much as I notice with these waltzes, because I'm the only one playing. Um, I don't have any time to. The opening of the reed is very, very small. So although I take in a lot of air, not a lot of air actually passes through the instrument. And so I get a buildup of bad air, um, air that doesn't have any oxygen. And so I, don't feel so good. um, and there's not a lot of there are not a lot of places to kind of blow out the bad air and take in a nice fresh
Mhm.
um, breath again.
Interesting. And in terms of musical phrasing with a piece like that, it sounded almost improvisatory to me. And I would, except for maybe a couple of split moments here and there, I, if I were listening to it, not knowing what his title was, I would have a hard time calling it a waltz, because it just doesn't feel like there was that sort of a sort of regularity that you expect to have in a waltz. Um, it's definitely a slower waltz, would you say?
Yeah, yeah. I think with all of these waltzes that he wrote, they have moments where you can certainly feel the 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and they are at
Hmm.
different speeds. Some are slower, some are faster.
Hmm.
Um, but they also, I think, what I appreciate so much about this original recording by Noel Devos is that he's quite free. He's quite
Mm.
free with them, and other recordings that I've heard are also, they are also quite free, and so I think if you just stuck to a strict um, um, rhythm,
Meter. Yeah,
pulse,
yeah. Right, right.
um, they would they wouldn't be quite as interesting.
Yeah,
Uh, there are definitely times that where the music wants to go ahead or pull back or things like that.
yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So you've agreed to play one more piece
Yeah.
as more or less the grand finale. This is a valse ingenua, and ingenua in Portuguese apparently means naive. So this is a fairly naive waltz.
Yeah.
Um, has nothing to do with being ingenious. It's only, but it's definitely naive. So let's hear what this is all about. Oh, what a nice ending. All of a sudden, oh, it's over. It's fantastic. So bravo to you. Really, very, very nice playing. Excellent technique, outstanding musicianship, and a very valued person in our orchestra. Thank you, Hazy. It's been really a real pleasure speaking with you and asking you these crazy questions, and also being having this first international interview here,
Perfect.
but between Massachusetts and Mexico City. Thank you, Hazy.
Thank you. This was wonderful.